The moment someone can make you angry, they have found a button inside you. They do not need to defeat you. They do not need to outsmart you. They do not need to control your life. All they need to do is say the right words, give you the right look, ignore you at the right moment, or treat you with just enough disrespect to make you lose control. The first moment of anger is often the most dangerous because it arrives before your intelligence has had time to intervene. Something happens. Someone says something disrespectful. Someone ignores you. Someone questions your ability. Someone behaves in a way that strikes directly at your pride. Within seconds, your body reacts. Your heart beats faster. Your muscles tighten. Your mind begins searching for weapons. You want to answer immediately, defend yourself immediately, punish the person immediately. This is where most people lose their power. Not because they feel anger, but because they allow anger to determine their next move. The pause is the space between the event and your reaction. It may last only 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds can separate a calculated response from a foolish mistake. In that space, you regain the ability to observe. Instead of immediately asking, what should I say to hurt them? You begin asking, what is actually happening here? Instead of allowing the other person to dictate your emotional state, you begin studying the situation from a distance. This is difficult because anger creates the illusion of urgency. It tells you that you must respond now. It tells you that if you do not defend yourself immediately, you will appear weak. It tells you that silence means defeat. But this is often exactly what the provocateur wants you to believe. They want you to react before you think. They want you to reveal your insecurity while you are trying to prove your strength. They want you to speak emotionally so that your words can later be used against you. The pause destroys this advantage. When someone provokes you, do not rush to give them the reaction they are waiting for. Breathe. Remain silent for a moment. Look at the situation as if you were watching two strangers interact. What did the person actually say? What did they mean? Are you certain of their intention, or are you filling in the blanks with your own assumptions? Was the behavior deliberate, or are you reacting to an interpretation you created in an instant? These questions create distance between you and the emotional storm. A person who reacts instantly is predictable. Others can learn exactly which words make them angry, which subjects make them defensive, and which situations make them lose control. Once your patterns become predictable, you become easy to manipulate. But when you develop the discipline to pause, your behavior becomes difficult to read. People can still attempt to provoke you, but they no longer know exactly what will happen next. The pause also gives you the opportunity to choose the level of response. Perhaps a situation deserves a direct answer. Perhaps it deserves a boundary. Perhaps it deserves distance. Perhaps it deserves nothing at all. Without the pause, all situations begin to look the same. Every irritation feels like an attack. Every disagreement feels like a battle. Every criticism feels like an insult. But with the pause, you can measure the situation instead of being consumed by it. You begin to realize that not every emotion requires expression. You can feel anger without displaying it. You can recognize disrespect without immediately creating a scene. You can feel the urge to defend yourself and still decide that defending yourself would give the other person more importance than they deserve. The pause is not weakness. It is the moment you reclaim authority over yourself. The other person may control what they say. They may control what they do. They may attempt to create confusion, anger, or humiliation, but they cannot control what you do next unless you surrender that decision to them. The pause reminds you that you still possess a choice, and with practice, the pause becomes longer. At first, you may catch yourself after the angry message has already been sent. Later, you catch yourself before pressing send. Eventually, you notice the anger rising before the words even leave your mouth. You begin to recognize the physical signs, the tightening in your chest, the heat in your face, the urge to speak faster, the sudden need to prove yourself. These signs become warnings rather than commands, and you begin to treat them as a signal to slow down, observe the situation, and choose your response deliberately. One of the greatest sources of anger is the habit of making everything about yourself. Someone fails to reply, and you assume they are deliberately ignoring you. Someone criticizes your work, and you assume they are trying to humiliate you. Someone behaves coldly, and you immediately decide that they must dislike you. A person succeeds, and you interpret their success as a threat to your own value. The event may be real, but the meaning you attach to it often creates the suffering. People are usually far more absorbed in themselves than they are in you. They are thinking about their own fears, their own problems, their own ambitions, their own insecurities, and their own private struggles. Yet the ego has a strange habit of placing itself at the center of every event. Someone looks away, and you think it must be about you. Someone speaks harshly, and you believe you must have become the target. Someone changes their behavior, and your mind immediately begins constructing a personal explanation. This habit makes you emotionally vulnerable because it turns every ordinary event into a judgment about your identity. The moment you stop taking everything personally, you begin to see people more accurately. A rude person may simply be rude. An insecure person may attack because they are insecure. A distracted person may not respond because their attention is elsewhere. A jealous person may criticize because your progress forces them to confront their own lack of progress. Their behavior may still affect you, but it does not necessarily define you. This distinction is essential. People often reveal themselves through their behavior. Their dishonesty reveals their character. Their cruelty reveals their character. Their envy reveals their character. Their inability to respect boundaries reveals their character. But many people make the mistake of interpreting someone else's behavior as evidence about their own worth. They think they treated me badly, therefore I must be unworthy. They think they rejected me, therefore I must be inferior. They think they insulted me, therefore I must prove them wrong. But another person's behavior is not an objective measurement of your value. If a person with poor judgment criticizes you, why should their opinion become the foundation of your identity? If a dishonest person accuses you of being dishonest, why should you immediately enter a desperate struggle to prove yourself? If a jealous person attempts to reduce your achievements, why should you allow their insecurity to become your emotional burden? The more you understand this, the less power people have over your emotional state. This does not mean becoming blind to disrespect. It does not mean allowing people to mistreat you without consequences. It means learning to separate their behavior from your identity. You can recognize that someone has treated you badly without deciding that something is wrong with you. You can walk away from a toxic person without carrying their opinion into your future. You can reject someone's judgment without becoming obsessed with proving them wrong. The need to prove yourself is often a hidden form of dependence. When you desperately need someone to recognize your worth, you have allowed them to become the judge of your worth. Their approval becomes a reward. Their criticism becomes a punishment. Their attention becomes a form of emotional currency. You begin adjusting your behavior according to their reactions, and slowly they gain control over your inner world. The stronger position is to understand that not everyone is qualified to evaluate you. Some people judge through envy, some judge through ignorance, some judge through their own emotional wounds, some judge because your existence reminds them of what they have failed to become. Their judgment may say more about their internal world than it ever says about you. When someone behaves badly toward you, pause and ask, what does this reveal about them? Instead of immediately asking, what is wrong with me? This simple change in perspective creates distance. You stop absorbing every insult as if it were truth. You stop allowing every rejection to become a definition. You stop allowing every person's mood to become your responsibility. You begin to understand that people can misunderstand you and still be wrong. They can dislike you without knowing you. They can criticize you without understanding your journey. They can reject you without recognizing your value. They can speak about you with complete confidence and complete ignorance. You do not have to attend every trial in which someone has decided to put you on the witness stand. Sometimes the most powerful response is to let people maintain their opinions while you continue building a life that does not require their permission, their approval, or their understanding. Much of the anger you feel is not created by what happens, but by the meaning you attach to what happens. The event itself is often simple. Someone does not respond to your message. Someone criticizes you. Someone walks past you without saying hello. Someone receives an opportunity you wanted. Someone speaks to you in a cold tone. These are events, but the mind rarely leaves them as events. It immediately begins creating a story. They ignored me because they do not respect me. They criticized me because they want to embarrass me. They succeeded because life is unfair to me. They did not invite me because everyone is against me. The event is one thing, the interpretation is another, and in many cases it is the interpretation that creates the emotional explosion. The mind hates uncertainty. When something happens and you do not know why, your imagination rushes to fill the gap. Unfortunately, the explanation you create is often shaped by your fears, insecurities, and past experiences. If you already fear rejection, a delayed reply becomes evidence that someone is rejecting you. If you already fear being disrespected, a simple disagreement becomes proof that someone is challenging your worth. If you already feel insecure about your abilities, a small criticism can feel like an attack on your entire identity. You are no longer reacting to the event, you are reacting to the story. This is why two people can experience the same situation and feel completely different emotions. One person receives criticism and thinks this may help me improve. Another receives the same criticism and thinks this person is trying to destroy me. One person is ignored and assumes the other may be busy. Another immediately creates a story of betrayal. The external event is similar, but the internal meaning creates a completely different reaction. The way to regain control is to separate facts from assumptions. Ask yourself, what do I know for certain? Not what do I suspect? Not what am I afraid is true? Not what story would make the situation feel more dramatic? What do I actually know? Perhaps the only fact is that someone did not answer your message. Everything else may be speculation. You do not know whether they are angry. You do not know whether they are trying to manipulate you. You do not know whether they are intentionally ignoring you. You do not know whether they are dealing with something unrelated to you. Yet the mind often takes a small amount of information and builds an entire emotional universe around it. This is where anger grows. A person makes one disrespectful comment and you begin thinking they always treat me this way. A friend disappoints you once and you decide nobody can be trusted. Someone rejects you and you conclude I will never be wanted. One failure becomes evidence that you are a failure. One betrayal becomes evidence that everyone is dangerous. One mistake becomes evidence that your entire future is doomed. This is emotional exaggeration. The mind takes one moment and tries to turn it into a permanent reality. The disciplined person refuses to allow one event to become an entire identity. They understand that a moment is not a pattern is not a destiny, and an emotion is not a fact. When you feel anger rising, question the interpretation before you obey the emotion. Ask yourself, what else could this mean? This question is powerful because it breaks the monopoly of the first explanation that entered your mind. Maybe the person was not insulting you. Maybe they were careless. Maybe they were not rejecting you. Maybe they were occupied. Maybe they were not trying to undermine you. Maybe they simply disagreed. Maybe their behavior was about them, not you. You do not have to force yourself to believe the most positive explanation. You simply need to stop treating the most negative explanation as absolute truth. This creates mental flexibility. You begin to understand that reality is often more complex than your first emotional interpretation. You stop allowing your mind to turn uncertainty into certainty. You stop treating assumptions as facts. You stop giving anger the authority to make decisions before you have gathered enough information. And as you become more careful with the meaning you attach to events, you become less vulnerable to emotional manipulation because you no longer allow someone else's actions to automatically determine the story you tell yourself about your own worth, your position, or your future. Much of the frustration people experience comes from expecting others to behave according to standards they never agreed to follow. You expect honesty from someone who has repeatedly lied. You expect loyalty from someone who has already shown that they are guided by convenience. You expect maturity from someone who constantly reacts like a child. You expect gratitude from someone who believes the world owes them everything. Then, when they behave exactly as their character has already shown you they will behave, you become shocked, angry, and disappointed. But disappointment often comes from refusing to accept what has already been revealed. People are not always going to act according to your values. They will not always be as considerate as you are. They will not always keep their promises. They will not always understand your intentions. They will not always appreciate your sacrifices. They will not always return the same energy you give them. And if you build your peace around the expectation that they should, you place your emotional state in the hands of people whose behavior you cannot control. The solution is not to become cynical or to assume that everyone is terrible. The solution is to observe more carefully and expect more realistically. When you understand human nature, people become less shocking. The selfish person acts selfishly. The insecure person becomes defensive. The jealous person attempts to reduce what they secretly desire. The manipulative person searches for weaknesses. The dishonest person changes their story when the truth becomes inconvenient. The attention seeker creates drama when attention begins to disappear. This understanding does not excuse their behavior. It simply prevents you from being surprised by it. There is a difference between being disappointed by someone and being surprised by someone. Disappointment may still occur, but when you've been observing carefully, you are less likely to feel personally betrayed by behavior that has already been demonstrated. You begin to see patterns instead of isolated moments. The first time someone lies, you may question the situation. The second time you take notice. The third time you begin to understand the pattern. At some point, the behavior is no longer a surprise. It is information. This is where observation becomes more powerful than expectation. Instead of asking, why are they not behaving the way I want them to behave? You begin asking, what have they shown me about who they are? This question changes everything. You stop arguing with reality. You stop trying to force people into roles they have never earned. You stop expecting a dishonest person to suddenly become honest simply because you have explained how much their dishonesty hurts you. You stop expecting an emotionally immature person to suddenly become wise because you have given them another chance. You stop expecting a selfish person to suddenly become generous because you have sacrificed for them. People may change, but you should judge them by consistent behavior rather than temporary promises. Many people remain angry because they repeatedly expect the same person to become someone else. They are not angry only at the behavior. They are angry because reality refuses to match the fantasy they created. They say, I thought they were different, but perhaps the person was never different. Perhaps you simply wanted them to be. This is why observation is so important. Watch what people do when they are angry. Watch how they treat those who cannot benefit them. Watch what they do when they make a mistake. Watch whether their apologies are followed by changed behavior. Watch how they react when someone else succeeds. Watch what happens when they no longer need anything from you. Character is often revealed in patterns, not speeches. When you observe instead of constantly expecting, you become calmer. You no longer need to be shocked by every act of selfishness. You no longer need to take every betrayal as a personal attack against your identity. You begin to understand that people act according to their nature, their interests, their fears, and their level of awareness. And when someone repeatedly reveals that they are careless with your trust, you do not need to become furious every time they prove it again. You simply adjust your expectations, reduce your access, and allow their behavior to teach you exactly how much space they deserve in your life. Your attention is one of the most valuable things you possess, yet most people give it away without realizing what they are doing. They allow one rude comment to occupy their mind for an entire day. They allow one person's rejection to destroy their confidence. They allow an enemy to become the first thought they have in the morning and the last thought they have at night. They may have physically walked away from the person, but mentally they remain connected to them through resentment, anger, and endless mental conversations. This is one of the hidden costs of allowing people to bother you. They may have taken only a few seconds of your time, but you give them hours of your attention. They may have said one sentence, but you repeat it hundreds of times inside your mind. They may have moved on completely while you continue replaying the moment, imagining what you should have said and creating arguments that will never happen. You believe you are punishing them by remaining angry, but often you are only punishing yourself. Attention is energy. Whatever you repeatedly focus on begins to occupy more space inside you. If you focus on insults, you become more sensitive to insults. If you focus on betrayal, you begin searching for betrayal everywhere. If you focus on people who disrespect you, you become mentally trapped in their behavior. The person may no longer be present, but your attention keeps them alive in your mind. This is why you must become selective with what you allow to occupy your thoughts. Not every person deserves access to your inner world. Not every opinion deserves analysis. Not every criticism deserves a response. Not every insult deserves revenge. Not every misunderstanding deserves an explanation. There is a difference between being aware of what someone has done and continuously allowing it to control your mental state. You can remember the lesson without carrying the anger. You can recognize the betrayal without allowing the betrayer to control your future. You can learn from the disrespect without allowing the disrespect to become your identity. The goal is not to become blind. The goal is to become selective. When someone repeatedly creates chaos in your life, the strongest response is often not to argue with them endlessly. It is to reduce their access to you. Give them less information, give them less time, give them less emotional energy. Stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Stop trying to win approval from someone who benefits from keeping you insecure. Distance is sometimes more powerful than confrontation. You do not need to announce that you are withdrawing your energy. You do not need to make a dramatic speech. You do not need to convince the person that they have lost access to you. You simply change your behavior. You respond less, you reveal less, you engage less, you become unavailable for unnecessary drama, and slowly the person discovers that they can no longer reach the same parts of you. This is not always punishment. Sometimes it is protection. Your mind is a private territory. If you allow every angry, jealous, manipulative, or careless person to enter it whenever they wish, you will never experience real peace. You will constantly be reacting to people who are not even present. Imagine carrying every insult you have ever received, every rejection, every betrayal, every criticism, every rude comment, every person who underestimated you. You would become exhausted before the day even began. Yet many people do exactly this mentally. They carry old conversations into new relationships. They carry old betrayals into new opportunities. They carry the opinions of people from their past into their present identity. They allow someone who hurt them years ago to continue influencing how they trust, love, work, and live. At some point, you must decide that the lesson is enough. You do not need to keep suffering to prove that something hurt you. You do not need to remain angry to prove that someone was wrong. You do not need to keep thinking about the person who harmed you in order to remember what they taught you. Take the lesson. Leave the emotional weight. Direct your attention towards something that can actually improve your life, your work, your health, your skills, your goals, your future, the people who genuinely matter, the opportunities in front of you. Every hour spent obsessing over someone else's behavior is an hour removed from your own development. And while you are busy trying to understand why someone treated you badly, another person may be quietly building the life you keep saying you want. This is why emotional discipline is connected to ambition. A person with a serious purpose cannot afford to become emotionally available to every distraction. They learn to ask, does this deserve my attention before giving it away? Some things do, most things do not. The moment you begin protecting your attention, you begin protecting your peace. The moment you stop giving your energy to every provocation, you become harder to disturb. And the less access people have to your attention, the less power they have to control your emotional state, your decisions, and the direction of your life. The final step toward becoming someone who is rarely angered or disturbed by others is to build a life so deeply connected to your own purpose that temporary provocations begin to lose their importance. Many people are easily disturbed because their attention has no clear direction. Their minds are empty enough for every insult to become an event, every rejection to become a crisis, and every opinion to become a threat. When you have no larger mission demanding your energy, the smallest disturbances can feel enormous. A strong purpose changes the scale of your problems. When you are deeply committed to becoming better, building something meaningful, developing your skills, improving your health, or creating a future that matters to you, you begin to see emotional distractions differently. Someone may insult you, but you ask yourself, will this help me reach my goal? Someone may try to provoke you, but you ask, is this worth losing focus? Someone may criticize you, but you begin to separate useful information from meaningless noise. Purpose gives you a filter filter. Without purpose, every voice enters your mind. With purpose, you become selective about what deserves your attention. This does not mean that a person with purpose never feels anger. They still feel disappointment, frustration, and pain, but their emotions no longer become the center of their universe. They have somewhere else to direct their energy. They understand that anger can consume the same energy required to build a better life. Every hour spent obsessing over someone who disrespected you is an hour that could have been spent improving yourself. Every day spent planning revenge is a day that could have been spent moving closer to your goals. Every moment spent trying to prove your worth to someone who refuses to see it is a moment taken away from the work that would make their opinion irrelevant. Your progress is often the most powerful response you can give, not because you should live your life to impress people who doubted you, but because the more focused you become on your own development, the less dependent you become on their approval. You no longer need everyone to recognize your value because you are too busy creating evidence of your own growth. A person who is building a meaningful future does not have unlimited time for meaningless conflicts. They become protective of their energy because they understand its value. They begin to ask before reacting, what will this cost me? Not only financially or physically, but mentally. Will this argument cost me focus? Will this person cost me peace? Will this conflict distract me from the work I need to do? Will this reaction make me more powerful or simply more emotional? These questions create a distance between impulse and action. The world will always contain people who want to pull you away from yourself. Some do it through criticism, some through jealousy, some through manipulation, some through constant demands for your attention. They may not always ask you directly to abandon your goals, but every unnecessary conflict can quietly take you away from them. This is why you must become disciplined about where your energy goes. You cannot control what people say about you. You cannot control whether they understand you. You cannot control whether they appreciate your efforts. You cannot control whether they try to provoke you, but you can control whether their behavior becomes more important than your purpose. That is the real victory. You do not win by making every difficult person regret crossing you. You win by refusing to let them interrupt the person you are becoming. The more you build yourself, the less attractive emotional chaos becomes. You begin to understand that peace is not something other people give you. It is something you protect. You stop expecting the world to become less irritating and start becoming less available to irritation. You learn to walk away without needing the last word. You learn to remain silent without feeling defeated. You learn to let people misunderstand you without chasing them for approval. You learn to accept that some people will never see your value, and you stop wasting your life trying to force them to see it. Your purpose becomes stronger than your anger. Your future becomes more important than your resentment. Your self-respect becomes more valuable than temporary victory. And slowly, the things that once controlled your emotions begin to lose their power. The insult becomes a moment, the rejection becomes information, the criticism becomes something to examine, the provocation becomes a test of your discipline. You are no longer trying to become someone who never feels anger. You are becoming someone who refuses to let anger decide who they are. When your purpose is strong, your mind becomes harder to invade. When your attention is protected, your emotions become harder to manipulate. When your identity is rooted in your own values, the opinions of others lose their authority over you. The world will still try to provoke you, distract you, and pull you into battles that do not belong to you, but you do not have to answer every invitation to chaos. You can choose your peace, protect your focus, and continue moving forward while others remain trapped in the need to be heard, validated, and emotionally obeyed. And perhaps the greatest form of power is reaching the point where someone can try to disturb your peace, yet discovers that your mind is no longer a place they are allowed to control. That is when you stop living as a reaction to other people and begin living according to your own purpose, your own standards, in your own direction.